Hello, and welcome back to the Right on Crime podcast. Today, I am joined by Andy Kahan, who is from Houston Crimestoppers. Thank you, Andy, for coming
my pleasure.
today.
You bet.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of hear your background and what you do with Crimestoppers, what got you involved, and why you are so passionate about helping victims and working at the legislature as well.
So I'll age myself. I was a parole and probation officer in Harris County, Houston, in the 80s. And what I was seeing absolutely mortified and horrified me. Keep in mind, in the late 80s, we had a severe prison overcrowding problem in Texas, and inmates were only serving 1 month for every year they were sentenced to. So if you got 10 years, you were out in 10 months. Heck, you didn't even go to the penitentiary. You got released from the county jail. You got 20 years, you were out in 2. 80% of parole-eligible inmates were being approved. They even put out a memo, which they shouldn't have done that because I got a hold of it, showing how many people had to be released every day and every week.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up with that memo on a national show.
So it wasn't exactly an individualized approach, you would say.
If you were eligible, you were coming out. I was fond of saying you had to be a repeat axe murderer to be denied parole in the late 80s or early 90s. So Houston was bearing the brunt of a lot of those decisions, and headlines were gleaming almost every day of someone who'd been released and had gone on to further their criminal career, usually by violent crimes like murder or sexual assault. And there was a specific case that kind of propelled me into what I'm doing right now. It was a guy named Carl Wayne Bunchen, who has a rap sheet a mile long. He did 13 months of a sexual assault of a child. He was paroled to a halfway house, never showed up. No warrant was ever issued. Nobody did nothing. And for 6 weeks, he was missing. And he was pulled over by a motorcycle police officer by the name of Jim Irby on traffic. Bunchen, rightfully so, thought he was wanted and going back to prison. Got into a shootout with Officer Irby, shot and killed him.
Wow.
And his widow, it just touched me so bad what was happening, and nobody knew what was going on. And I just decided I was going to share my information, which nobody knew, with her. And that kind of led things to spiral. In the mayor's race in 1991, one of the candidates that was running for mayor met with several victims organizations. I had started doing some volunteer work with parents of murdered children, surviving family members of homicide, people against violent crime. And Bob Lanier said if he was elected, what could he do to help them? And they said, we want a staff person out of the mayor's office to address victims' rights and public safety. And Bob Lanier, being a man of many, many, many words, just went, sure. He was elected.
Yeah.
I walked into the chief of staff office. He looked at me and said, I haven't the faintest bleepingest idea what you're supposed to bleep and do. Every fourth word was a cuss word from Dave Walden. Because we were, at that time, and still to this day, I believe, we were the only city in the country that had an advocate, an ombudsman, a troubleshooter, and, trust me, a few other choice words that I was given, staffed out of a mayor's office. I couldn't call New York, LA, Chicago and said, what are you guys doing? Nor could they put a manual in front of me and say, read the manual. I was given a very unique opportunity to build something from scratch and mold it. And that's pretty much what I've been doing ever since 1992.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I love that story. You know, the mayor saw a need and you just filled that gap and really took it and ran with it. And I'm so thankful for everything that you do for victims in Harris County especially. But
so I was at City Hall for 18 years. Then in 2010, I was transferred to Houston Police Department, and I was at HPD for about 8 years. And then Crimestoppers made me, in the great Godfather fashion, an offer I couldn't refuse. And just when I thought I was getting out, they lured me back in and said, we want you to start our program. And I said, okay, this will be the second one that I've started from scratch. You bet. And I've been at Crimestoppers, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me, being with this organization.
That's great.
I'm blessed and honored to be with this incredible group of people who are so dedicated to public safety.
And Ronnie is great. I know that I've worked with her in the past on bail, which is really what we're here to talk about.
Our CEO, Rania Mankarius, I would go to war with her.
Yes,
there is very few people I would go to war with her, and Rania is one of them, because the trust factor that she puts in you because she believes you should know what you should be doing, and it's your job, and I'm very rarely going to interfere with what you're doing because you're the expert in it. So to be able to have that trust factor and point factor, and when we decided, it was in 2020, the board met and they decided they wanted Crimestoppers to pursue the bail issue. And they brought me in and they said, Mr. Kahan, we want you to be the point person on this. I said, all right, you guys know how I work, and if I do take this on, I'm going full steam. I'm going to step on toes, and there's going to be people that aren't going to like it. As long as you support me and back me up, I will be more than happy to take this on. And that's kind of brings us to where we are with this right now. So, you know, in 2020, you know, when COVID hit, a lot of us had to work out of the house, and Crimestoppers couldn't do a lot what they were doing with announcing, getting rewards and things. So I started doing a lot of research on the bookings, and that's where I kept going, wait a second, this guy's been out on how many bonds? And I kept noticing that. And I just started documenting. So, you know, I guess that's one positive thing that came out of COVID.
Well, you're probably the only person in the state who documents it in the way that you do, because I feel like you must go through every single person who's bonded out. I don't even know how you do it, to be honest with you, because I'll go in and try to just look at one person and their history and all the bonds and everything, and that takes quite a bit of time.
It's very tedious.
Yeah.
You can't shortcut.
Right.
I know what I'm looking for when I look at, you know, people that are, there's certain things that I look at, and I know very quickly whether this person it merits me looking further or not. So I actually developed my own criteria, and I just started documenting anyone who was charged with murder who was out on more than one felony bond, or they were given a PR, personal recognizance bond. So if you were out on one bond and you were charged with murder, you didn't make my list, because you're entitled to that bond. We have no problem, no issues at all with any defendant getting out on bond. Where we kind of drew the line was what we were seeing was this repetitive, nonstop bond after bond after bond, and that's what we were seeing in Harris County.
And that's part of the reason that we need SJR 5 or HJR 15, which is Senator Huffman and Chairman Smithy's bills to expand a judge's ability to deny, right? Because in a lot of those cases, they don't have the option. Some of the cases, they do have the option to deny, and they're not. But in a lot of the cases, they don't even have the option to deny someone bail. So that's a big reason why we got involved is, you know, we need a constitutional amendment, and we believe that bail should be based on risk. If a judge thinks that someone is a risk of flight or to their community, they should be able to deny someone bond pretrial. But at the same time, if someone's low risk, maybe first time nonviolent misdemeanor,
we have zero issue with giving anyone, quote, who's deemed low risk, whether it's misdemeanor or felony, a PR bond.
Right.
You get that. You know, there was an adage that I used to have in Harris County. It used to be one bond per customer. And if you were out on bond, and if you were charged with another crime, which is an obvious violation of your bond, then that should have been the end of the story. But we were not seeing that. We had one guy that we did a story on. He was on 12 bonds for aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon. 12. Now, first of all, dude, you're not very good at this, because you keep getting caught, and you might want to consider a new career.
Right.
But when one of the reporters asked the judge, well, why do you keep him? And the judge said, well, I have to. It's mandated. I have to give him a bond, and it can't be punitive in nature. And I'm going like, you know, come on, there has to be a point in time where you have to recognize that this is not in the best interest of public safety, and it's also not in the best interest of the defendant. And I'll give you a clear-cut example of that. We had a very high-profile case in Houston. It involved the murder of an off-duty New Orleans police sergeant. He was here with fraternity brothers, and they came to an upper-scale restaurant by the Galleria, and they were sitting outside having drinks and eating dinner on a Saturday, and they were accosted by this gang that demanded their jewelry. And things got really bad, and they shot and killed two of the guys. One of the defendants charged with capital murder was a 19-year-old man named Frederick Jackson. 19-year-old Frederick Jackson was out on 5 felony bonds in the first 8 months of 2021. And these were repetitive bonds, not non-sequential. They were all happening different times,
Right.
not all at once. And I thought to myself, do you really think you gave this 19 young man, did you really think you did him any favors? Because every time you released him, he would come out and reoffend again, and then you'd release him again. And I said, now you got a 19-year-old that's looking at a potential death sentence or life without parole. You didn't do him any favors.
Definitely not. I actually remember that case. I think I may have written an op-ed using that case as kind of the prime example of like, this is a problem. I mean, we talk about in research and criminal justice, swiftness and certainty are the most important factors to deterring crime. And when someone's getting out on bonds over and over, and the trial is taking years at this point in a lot of our jurisdictions, it's not swift and it's not certain.
You weren't meant to be on bond for years.
Right.
That's it. That was not meant to be for 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, things happen.
Yeah.
So that was another problem, was this lengthy period. So it was a perfect storm of everything that was occurring, and luckily, we were able to document that. I've documented now. There's over 200 people that have been murdered. I'll say allegedly, but a lot of them have now been convicted by defendants released on more than one felony bond or a PR bond in Harris County. But I will tell you, our numbers have dropped dramatically in the last 2 years.
And why is that, you think?
I think it's a combination of passing Senate Bill 6, which eliminated PR bonds for defendants charged with certain violent crimes. And I do believe it's because we keep putting, quote, the pressure on this issue.
Yeah.
We keep talking about it. We do a weekly show on local Fox News. Every week we do a segment called Breaking Bond. We've been doing it for 4.5 years. That's unheard of in TV news, to devote a weekly segment on the same topic on a different issue, defendant every week. We're still doing it.
That's amazing. And I mean, back to Senate Bill 6 too, the Damon Allen Act that was passed in 2021 that we both worked a lot on. It did even more than just, limiting personal bond for violent crimes. It was, like a summarized version of criminal history that a judge actually has to review and consider now, which they were not receiving before. Training for magistrates. I mean, it did a ton of stuff. It was very comprehensive, and Senator Huffman did a great job on that. And so I'm just looking forward to hopefully this session we can get through and pass the...
Well, was it the third time's a charm?
Third time's a charm. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling lucky this session. I think that we'll be able to get the constitutional amendments passed.
My position on that's very simple. I think Texas voters should be able to decide whether or not a judge should have discretion, and that's the key word, discretion. It's not a mandate, whether or not to deny bond to a defendant charged with certain violent crimes. And even judges, and even in Harris County, will say we need discretion. We don't have a choice. And it was clearly put, on the front page what happened in June of 2024 when you had the murder of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary, that captured national and international headlines and became an issue in the presidential race. People were very upset when a judge gave those two defendants a bond, albeit it was a very high bond. But I kept saying, you know what? That judge has no choice, because at that time the state didn't determine whether or not they were going to seek death or not. He has to give a bond. That's why we need the constitutional amendment.
Right. Yes. 100%. I agree with you. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to working with you moving forward, and hopefully...
what I hope? I hope that we can, my goal is that eventually our breaking bond will be canceled. And the reason it will be canceled is because we don't have any more of these cases to feature. Right.
You don't want the job security. You would like no more victims, right?
That would be the best of everything. So I'll give you one last adage. As a victim advocate, I try to take negatives and turn them into positive action for social change. I cannot go back and change what happened to you or your family, but we try to make things better for others to come along, and you've achieved a lasting legacy. That's what victim advocacy is about.
That's so important. I know I said this, but I'm very thankful that you do this. It's so important. And I know that the victims in Houston as a whole are very, very grateful for you.
Well, as long as I have passion, I'll continue to do what I do.
I love it. You are very passionate. You're actually fearless, I think. You were telling me a story the other day about how you even ended up in Texas. You drew a state out of a hat, and that's where you ended up. And I think that just shows
my only goal was I no more snow.
Yeah.
Get out of the snow, get out of the cold. Let me go south somewhere, and ended up here and never went back.
Yeah. You have a fearless spirit and you've turned it into such greatness for victims and advocating for them. And so I appreciate you on behalf of everyone in Houston and victims. And so thank you for being here today, and looking forward to working with you. Thank you for listening.
For wearing black.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm called,
so that we can match.
The man in black usually.
Yes.
So
yeah.
yes.
Thank you for listening to the Right on Crime podcast. If you would like more information on criminal justice reform, you can go to rightoncrime.com.